Shortly after the unanticipated success of the first Super Smash Bros., Masahiro Sakurai and HAL Laboratories sat down with Nintendo to discuss developing a sequel for the soon-to-be debuted GameCube. A huge part of the GameCube was its increased processing power, and Nintendo wanted to show this off by having a full motion video trailer shown at E3, which they ended up doing. This trailer would then go on to be the actual opening of the game on the disc. Sakurai saw this as the, quote, biggest project he had ever led up to that point. While the original Smash was mostly a big testing ground for the concept behind the game, its success proved that Melee really needed to have the absolute best quality possible. As a result, a ton of content was considered and even partially developed for the game that never ended up seeing the light of day, at least on the GameCube. Just like in Smash 64, many stages received minor updates between their beta and demo appearances and the final look. One such stage is Great Bay, which initially had the laboratory as a part of the stage. Players could jump on top of it and even go inside the lab itself. This was changed in the final game, making the laboratory simply a part of the background and you couldn't interact with it at all. However, the inside of the lab still actually has some textures and models inside of it, which are left over from when this idea still existed. Green Greens also had a drastically different look. While the stage layout remained very similar, the overall appearance used to look far more realistic. The final stage looks more cartoony, which better resembles the Kirby franchise's overall aesthetic. Another Kirby stage, Fountain of Dreams, had a different layout in its early days. It was missing the very top platform, having only one on the left and one on the right. Interestingly, aside from this missing platform, the stage itself looks pretty identical to what we received in the final game. Icicle Mountain, the seemingly never-ending stage from Melee's Adventure Mode, also featured an enemy change on the stage. In the Japanese release of Ice Climber, the Topi enemies were designed based on seals. However, in the release to Western audiences, this enemy was changed to a more obscure and original design, likely to avoid any controversy with seal clubbing. This change from the original NES game translates over into Smash, with Icicle Mountain having the seal Topi in the Japanese release, but the newly created design for the international version. Pokemon Stadium's screen was shown blank in early screenshots, though this may be because the stage was simply not completely developed yet. Rainbow Cruise looked far bleaker than it does in the final version of the game. Actually, it kind of reminds me of the treatment that Mushroomy Kingdom got in Brawl. Just this weird desert version of what's supposed to be a bright and colorful level. Temple had some platforms that aren't in the final stage. Interestingly, while this isn't in the game, the special movie still has these platforms intact. Yoshi's Island had considerable changes to its layout. The hole is much wider in the beta, the rotating blocks are in a different layout, including some that go vertically, and there are also note blocks which allow you to bounce if you land on them, and they don't appear in the final game at all. And on the topic of Yoshi, Yoshi's story has a drastic amount of change. The final stage is basically a battlefield with walls that go all the way down, but the beta had some crazy stuff going on. The platforms seem to be hovering over either a hole or ground that is much lower, and they aren't in every shot, which means that they probably would have been moving platforms. The slopes were huge, enough for Captain Falcon and Bowser to be fighting on, and they also have these things on a path that I have actually no idea what they are. They vaguely remind me of the paths that Fuzzies travel on, but obviously those aren't Fuzzies, so I have no clue. As for stages that aren't featured in the game at all, Melee has quite a few. First up is the stage Akanea, a Fire Emblem stage named after the continent in the games which star Marth. This stage currently can't be accessed in any way. Any attempt crashes the game, and all we know is that in the game files, a slot was made for the stage. Sakurai also confirmed this suspicion on the Smash Bros. Website when a fan asked about a Fire Emblem stage in the game. He stated that they planned to include the stage originally, and that it would include onagers hurling boulders as well as dragons and mages in some way. The stage, of course, was scrapped, which is why fights with Marth and Roy in single player tend to take place on Temple. There was also the idea of a stage based on Sprout Tower from Violet City found in Pokemon Gold and Silver, however, this idea never made it past the planning stages. Then there's the stage called Dummy, an entirely black stage that apparently only has a single platform in the middle, although when I tried to load the stage, my characters just fell forever. While ordinarily the stage can't be accessed because it doesn't have any background music assigned, modding this allows the player to play on the stage. The stage also has blast zones, but they are very far away and the game will crash if the player goes near them. There's speculation that the dummy stage is used as the result screen, however there has been no evidence to prove or contradict this. But there are some properly playable leftover stages. Ice Top and 10-2 are identical stages that can be found in the data and are intended to be a second Ice Climber stage. While every stage has its own proper name, they are also numbered for adventure mode, so Icicle Mountain is 10-1, and this second stage would have been 10-2. Again, on the Melee website, Sakurai stated that this stage was planned and scrapped, and that the stage would have been called Summit. This of course would later be realized as the stage for Ice Climbers in Brawl. Following this is Test, which based on the name is obviously a testing stage for the game. Test is a gigantic stage with largely untextured platforms that stretch for a long distance. The background had much speculation around it. Because of the low quality, many people thought it could be either a restaurant around Japan or an image of some of the HAL Laboratory offices. However, it's been confirmed that the background is actually a picture of Cafe Verona in Palo Alto, California, which is a common image used for testing purposes in OpenGL rendering. The final unused stage is called T-Seek, which was going to be used as a unique target test stage for Sheik before it was decided that Zelda and Sheik would simply share the same stage. This stage didn't seem to get very far in development, consisting of only a single platform with 3 targets. But now let's talk about characters that were planned for Melee's release but ended up on the cutting room floor. By now, it's well known that Hideo Kojima, creator of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, is a close personal friend with Sakurai, and he asked Sakurai if Snake could be a playable character in Melee. At the time of this proposal, however, Melee was far too deep into development for them to have time to create a whole new character for the game, so Snake just wasn't feasible. He of course showed up later in Brawl and then returned in Ultimate, making these rumors of his inclusion in Melee somewhat valid. Sonic was another character considered for Melee. The then head of Sonic team, Yuji Naka, spoke with Edge magazine and said that Sonic was considered but ultimately not added, again due to time constraints, likely because Nintendo wanted the game available for the GameCube's launch. Sonic was another third party which has since become a staple in Smash, first appearing in Brawl and being in every game since. Other characters were considered but passed over for one reason or another. Sakurai was very insistent that the game should have a character representing the classic NES era, and many games can fit this bill. Before finally settling on Ice Climbers, Balloon Fighter, Urban Champion, Bubbles from Clu Clu Land, and Excite Biker were all considered as possible candidates. Sakurai also confirmed in a 2016 interview with Nico Nico that Ayumi Tachibana from Famicom Detective Club was considered playable for Melee, but because of its Japan exclusivity, she would be an incredibly unfamiliar character to international players. Mother 3's Lucas was also intended to replace Ness as the representative from the Mother series. Mother 3 was actively being developed for the N64 at the time, titled Earthbound 64, and this would have been a good opportunity to show off the new character. However, Mother 3 was scrapped for the 64 before being moved to the Game Boy Advance, so Ness remained. It kinda makes you wonder how Smash would feel without Ness being a veteran character for each and every game. Takamaru from the mysterious Murasame Castle was also briefly considered. He ended up being passed on for Melee as his franchise is very obscure and Japan exclusive, so this was another case where international audiences would be very unfamiliar with that character. Sakurai also stated on the Melee website that he'd like to see Mach Rider in the game, simply because Mach Rider has such a cool name. And lastly, Wario was a big contender for Melee. On the Smash website, Sakurai said that if he had time to add just one more character to Melee, Wario would be his pick. This is naturally why Wario is one of the earlier characters in Brawl's lineup, shown at Brawl's very first reveal. A few characters have also been discussed since Melee has come out, but Sakurai himself has never actually said that these characters were considered. At the time of Melee's development, Rareware was a very closely related developer to Nintendo. Sakurai has been questioned if any properties from those games would join Smash. He responded that characters such as James Bond or Banjo and Kazooie from Rare would be difficult due to copyright issues. Particularly, James Bond was a hard no, not only because of the violent nature of his potential moveset, but that copyright issues with the films, as well as including the real-life likeness of James Bond's actor, could cause huge development delays. Despite this, the motion sensor bomb in Melee's international release is based on its depiction in GoldenEye 007, and the Japanese appearance of the motion sensor bomb, as well as the cloaking device, are based on items found in Perfect Dark, another Rare title. Speaking of items, there were a few that were scrapped prior to release. Ditto was to appear out of Pokeballs and remains a part of the game's code, though incomplete. In its existing form, Ditto simply appears, says its name, and then vanishes. Were it to be fully functioning, Ditto would transform into the player that summoned it and would fight for them. As we know, this function would finally come to be in Ultimate, though it was scrapped from Melee likely due to lack of development time. Assist capsules were also an idea that ultimately was passed on for Melee, as confirmed by Sakurai on the Smash website. These would have worked exactly as assist trophies do in later games, similar to Pokeballs, but for characters that aren't Pokemon. And speaking of characters, Sukapon was a planned character that was going to be used as an item. Fighters would have been able to ride on Sukapon, however, this too was cut only to return in a future game. The content doesn't stop there though. A few roster-wide animations have been found within the code of the game that were ultimately passed on for use in the final version. However, with the power of technology, we've been able to dig up these animations. First is a brief highlight intro for each and every character in the game. This is assumed to be for All-Star mode, announcing each character just before the fight. This was likely passed on as All-Star mode evolved into more than single character fights, so these intros would be out of place halfway through the run. They're also a bit redundant in the All-Star rest area because you get a preview of who you're going to fight just before you enter the light. The second instance of unused animations are pairs of animations for every character, titled Selected and Selected Wait. These were likely animations intended for the character select screen when a character is chosen. Smash 64 has this on its character select screen, and as Melee is the sequel, it makes sense that they would use what is established in the previous entry as the base for the new game. However, of course, Melee ultimately decided on simply having renders for each character rather than full-on animations. While the selected wait animations go relatively unused, many of the selected animations would be repurposed as victory animations for each character. These animations would also be used later on in Brawl as idling victory poses and taunts. The final interesting tidbit actually exists in the game, but in ways you wouldn't really notice. These exist in trophies with reflective parts. In modeling, you need a special texture specifically for the reflection because otherwise it wouldn't be reflecting anything. So many trophies have some interesting textures. The Ayumi Tachibana trophy has a cat's face for its reflection. Fire Kirby has, for some reason, a baby's face. The Metroid trophy has the Super Metroid title screen, which is a neat little Easter egg. And similarly, Metal Mario has a reflection of the Yoshi's Island stage. The Ocarina of Time trophy has a reflection of the sky, and finally, multiple trophies use this castle image, which is actually a screenshot of Asohe Castle from Earthbound 64. And that, guys, is everything that I found interesting hid deep within Melee's beta and unused files. And then of course there's a little bit of Easter egg stuff mixed in there. There's of course far more that I could talk about, but a lot of it is pretty mundane. There's stuff just like text that doesn't really mean anything or things like that. But I'd love to know what your favorite little fact was from this video, and if you know of something that I missed, I would love to hear about it down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to hit the like button. If you're new here, then please be sure to subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Peace out, and I hope you have an awesome day.